Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly out of your comfortable modern world and step straight into the pale, honey gold dawn rising over ancient Egypt. You blink up at the sky, already feeling the dry warmth brushing your cheeks, and before you even stand, there's a tiny whisper of a reality check floating through your head. You probably won't survive this. Not dramatically, just gently, politely, in the way an unprepared tourist probably wouldn't survive being dropped into a Bronze Age civilization with zero warning. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me your location and local time down in the comments, because there's something soothing about knowing we're all nodding off together across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You're lying on a reed mat you absolutely do not remember agreeing to sleep on, tracing the gritty texture of the fibers beneath your palm. It smells faintly of river plants, and just a hint of the sweat from whoever used it last. You inhale. The morning air tastes like the Nile drifting in on a breeze, cool shadows dissolving into sunlight.
You stretch your legs, groaning just a little, because apparently sleeping on a mat stuffed with reeds is a character-building experience. Someone near you murmurs a greeting in a dialect you don't understand, but it's a friendly, casual sound, like they're already up, already moving, already ready for the day, in a world where everyone wakes before the sun fully claims the sky. You push yourself upright and instantly recognize something that historians like to point out. Mornings in ancient Egypt start early because the day's heat is not a joke. The sun climbs like it's being chased, and you get maybe one polite hour of coolness before the air begins to shimmer. A mainstream fact hits you right away. As ridiculous as it sounds, this civilization really did depend on the Nile so intensely that entire calendars, festivals, and agricultural cycles rotated around its flooding patterns. But you, sitting here rubbing sleep from your eyes, are mostly focused on something else: how dry the air feels on your skin. It's like you've been air fried. Your feet crunch against the packed earth floor. It's cool now, but you can tell it won't stay that way. You shuffle toward the open doorway of the small mud brick house you woke in. Don't worry, you weren't kidnapped. You were simply hosted, ancient style, and step into the glow of a rising sun that paints everything in soft amber. Houses around you are simple, rectangular, built of sun-baked mud brick that looks surprisingly sturdy. They have flat roofs, and some already have people sitting up there, rugging sleep from their eyes or tying up their hair. The soundscape is familiar in some ways: a rooster, distant voices, the rustle of palm fronds. But something is different. People are busy already, moving with purpose because the day demands it. As you take your first few steps into the village lane, you notice details you wouldn't catch in a museum display: the slight tilt of walls settling over centuries, the texture of mud plaster that feels both rough and soft, the smell of bread baking in clay ovens somewhere nearby. Your stomach growls, although you're also slightly terrified of what might count as breakfast here. You'll deal with that later. For now, you're scanning the horizon, taking in the Nile's ribbon of shimmering blue. It's closer than you expected, just a short walk down a slope where acacia trees cluster. That's no coincidence. Villages in ancient Egypt cling to the river like house cats to a warm laptop. Without the Nile's annual flood, life here simply doesn't happen. Yet even as you admire the view, a bead of sweat forms at your hairline. Yes, already. The sun hasn't even reached full brightness, and it's already giving you that hydration challenge look. You take another step and something brushes your ankle. A skinny village dog trotting past, giving you a glance that clearly says, "You're new here and probably hopeless." You laugh under your breath. That counts as your first light joke of the day. You watch as the dog darts down the path, possibly looking for scraps or simply avoiding chores. Standing here, breathing in this dusty, river-sweet air, you get a sense of something most people forget. Ancient Egypt is alive. It's not the sterile, golden-lit museum version. It's noisy, dusty, fragrant, a little chaotic. A woman nearby hauls a basket of grain onto her hip with the ease of someone who's done it since she could walk. A kid chases a goose, loses, and the goose struts away victorious. You can almost hear the historians debating in the background. Historians still argue whether village life was more relaxed or more regimented. But right now, for you, it's simply overwhelming in the most grounded, sensory way. You wander a few steps farther and feel the shift in the air as the sun rises another inch. Heat pools instantly on your shoulders. You squint at the sky. No clouds, of course not. Rain is basically a rumor in this landscape. You're already starting to understand why the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun with such intensity. When you live somewhere this bright, this dry, this dependent on light for survival, the sun isn't just a celestial object. It's a boss, a very micromanaging boss. Someone hands you a strip of cloth, linen, slightly coarse, light, and dyed with something earthy. You assume it's meant for your head because they pantomime wrapping it. You obey. Congratulations, it's your first attempt at desert sun management. The linen helps, surprisingly. You feel mildly triumphant. Then a fly lands directly on your cheek, ruins your victory moment, and buzzes casually away. Fly 1, you 0. As you take in the scene, you remember hearing that Egyptians sometimes used crocodile dung as a type of cosmetic or protective paste. Yes, that's your quirky tidbit for this section. And while you don't see anyone smearing reptile poop on themselves right now, you're increasingly aware that Egyptians had environmental tricks you do not. Sunburn is coming for you, shade is sparse, and your modern SPF-dependent self is already sweating through that borrowed cloth. You run your fingers along a nearby wall, curious. The mudbrick is cool from the night air, but already warming up. You think about how much engineering goes into a structure this simple. Straw mixed with clay, molded, dried in the sun. Strong, affordable, fixable. Practicality over aesthetics. You're starting to admire it, even if a tiny part of you hopes no scorpions live inside the cracks. Don't worry, they usually prefer hiding under stones. Usually. Farther down the path, a man with a shaved head glances at you, amused. Most Egyptians keep their hair short for comfort and hygiene, though wigs are a whole fashion universe you'll eventually see. For now, he seems entertained by your "I'm not built for this world" face. You wave awkwardly. He chuckles. Friendly laughter, not mocking. Probably. You take one more deep breath, feeling the land wake around you. Clay ovens warming, river breezes fading, livestock calling. This is your first morning in ancient Egypt, a landscape that will reveal generosity and hardship in equal measure. And already, even before breakfast, you can sense why lasting a full day here will challenge every modern instinct you have. You step farther into the brightening morning, and the second the sun clears the horizon, the heat hits you like someone opened an oven door you didn't ask for. It's not dramatic, not a blast of fire, not a burning scorch, but a steady, creeping warmth that seeps into your shoulders, the back of your neck, the tops of your feet. You blink, squinting at the way the landscape shifts from gentle gold to sharp, sun-soaked beige. And just like that, the pleasant desert morning slides into the beginning of a long, dry grind. You trudge along the narrow path, already wishing you had one of those modern insulated water bottles with the built-in straw and the smug promise of keeping liquids cold for 24 hours. Here, the closest thing you're getting is a clay jar that sweats almost as much as you do. Someone hands you one, generous really, and the water inside tastes faintly like dust and pottery, but you gulp it anyway. Hydration is hydration, and besides, in this climate, you need every drop. Ancient Egyptians knew it too. A mainstream fact pops into your mind as you swallow. They structured their days around the heat, front-loading labor before noon, because by midday, the sun doesn't care about your plans. It rules everything. As you walk, a thin film of dust kicks up around your ankles. It's soft, almost powdery, coating your skin in a fine beige layer. You brush it away, and it immediately settles again. Congratulations. This is your new default state. Dust is now your closest companion. Dust on your arms, dust on your clothes, dust in your sandals. A kid passes you with a casual wave, his bare feet slapping the ground, kicking up miniature sast arms with each step. He doesn't seem to notice. He's built different. Literally. You, on the other hand, sneeze so violently that a man walking behind you speeds up, glances at you with concern, then continues on with the resigned expression of someone who fully expects foreigners to be fragile. The chores begin early here. You hear the grind of querns, large, flat stones used for grinding grain, as women kneel and push heavy upper stones back and forth. The motion looks simple from afar, but when one of them gestures for you to try it, you quickly realize the truth. This is the ancient equivalent of an arm day workout combined with cardio. The grain smells nutty, and the sound of grinding is rhythmic, but the weight of the stone surprises you. You push, and it barely moves. They watch politely, but you can sense the collective thought forming. This one's not lasting the day. You give them a tired smile, stand up again, and immediately feel your lower back complaining. The woman pats your shoulder sympathetically. A stray cat whines around your leg, clearly expecting food. Egyptian cats are not pets. They are co-workers, pest control specialists, VIPs of the rodent management world. You reach down to scratch its chin, and it gives you a casual, approving blink. 1 point for you. The cat probably assumes you're useful after all, which is generous of it. The heat grows thicker, like warm cloth settling over your body. You squint toward the horizon and see nothing but light, sand, and the faint shimmer of the river. The village shakes awake fully now, voices rising, livestock bleating, wooden wheels creaking. Men haul nets, tools, plows. Women carry baskets of laundry, jars of water, trays of dough. You feel lazy just watching them, but you're also beginning to understand something unexpected. Surviving here isn't just about enduring heat. It's about constant motion, constant tasks, constant effort. There's no such thing as a slow morning where you sip iced coffee while checking notifications. Well, technically you are sipping, but it's lukewarm river water with a bonus note of sediment. You head toward a communal well, following two teens who are chatting in rapid-fire Egyptian. You don't understand a word, but you don't need to. They're clearly discussing someone in the village, and you catch their laughter bouncing off the mudbrick walls. One of them spots you struggling with the uneven ground and gestures that you can try lifting the wooden pole attached to the water bucket. The pole looks simple. It is not simple. It might as well be an entire tree. You heave it upward using what little upper body strength you possess. Your arms tremble like overcooked noodles. You manage to raise it halfway before the teens politely rescue you. Historians still argue whether daily labor here should be considered backbreaking or simply normal for the era, you think faintly as your arms continue shaking. Honest answer? Both. Absolutely both. As you continue walking through the village's packed lanes, another quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Ancient Egyptians believed onions had protective qualities, so strong that even just carrying them could ward off illness. And sure enough, a woman passes you with a woven basket so full of onions that the smell hits you like an aromatic punch. You try not to cry in front of strangers, but your eyes water anyway. She laughs softly, not at you, just at the universe being amusing. The sun climbs higher, and the temperature follows like an eager apprentice. You wipe sweat from your forehead and realize your body is beginning to react in strange ways. Your skin is drying out faster than you can blink, and the linen cloth from earlier sticks to your neck. A man walks past holding a pot of cool river clay, spreading a thin smear over his arms. Sunscreen, ancient style. At this point, you'd gladly try it, but you hesitate when you recall yesterday's fact about crocodile dung cosmetics, and now every ancient skincare product suddenly feels suspicious. You step aside as a group of workers passes, carrying bundles of reeds and long poles toward the fields. The pace of everyone around you is steady, deliberate. No rushing, no frantic movements, just a rhythm you aren't used to. It's like the entire village calibrated its energy to survive the day, while you, modern, soft, lightly panicking, are burning through yours too quickly. A sudden gust of hot wind sweeps through the alley, and you brace yourself as the dust swirls upward. It gets in your nose, your mouth, your eyelashes. You sputter, coughing, and a nearby woman hands you a strip of cloth to tie around your face. Instant improvement. But also, you now look like someone about to rob an ancient granary. You try to tie it casually failing. She fixes it for you with skilled fingers. You find brief relief in the shade of a tall date palm. Beneath it, a man sits, repairing a fishing net. The rhythmic looping of cord through his fingers is almost hypnotic. He gestures for you to sit. You do, gratefully, sighing with that exaggerated tired noise you usually reserve for the end of yoga class. The man glances at your posture and laughs, a soft, friendly laugh. He hands you a piece of the netting to try. You poke at it. The cords instantly tangle. You poke again. Somehow, it gets worse. He gently takes it back, still smiling. You remain there for a moment, letting the shade cool your face. The palm leaves rustle. A bird calls somewhere above. For a fleeting second, ancient Egypt feels peaceful, calm, warm, alive. Then someone nearby shouts, and you look over to see two goats arguing passionately about something that probably isn't worth the fuss. One of them wins. You're not sure how you can tell it won, but the victory strut is unmistakable. You chuckle. That's your second joke moment. Goats are weirdly good at slapstick comedy. You rise again and resume your slow trek through the village, dust clinging to your ankles, sweat drying on your arms. The chores continue in every direction. Grain being pounded, laundry scrubbed against stones, pots filled, fish cleaned, baskets woven. Life here is constant motion, because stillness means falling behind. You realize with a prick of humility that lasting even a single day isn't about physical endurance alone. It's about adapting to a pace and climate your body never trained for. You wipe your forehead again. The linen slips. You readjust it. A bead of sweat falls directly into your eye, burning like lemon juice. You make a dramatic "ah" noise. A kid sees you and mimics the noise perfectly, laughing. You can't even be mad. It's pretty funny. And as you continue down the lane, shoulders warming, water jar getting lighter, you wipe your forehead again. The linen slips. You readjust it. A bead of sweat falls directly into your eye, burning like lemon juice. You make a dramatic "ah" noise. A kid sees you and mimics the noise perfectly, laughing. You can't even be mad. It's pretty funny. And as you continue down the lane, shoulders warming, water jar getting lighter, dust rising around you in little golden clouds, you feel the slow, inevitable weight of the day settling onto your modern bones. The grind has only just begun, and already your energy is dipping like a melting candle. In this world, the sun is relentless, the chores unforgiving, and the air itself seems to challenge you. You're only a couple of hours into the morning. You have no idea how you're going to survive the rest. You follow the smell before you even realize you're doing it. Warm, nutty, slightly smoky, drifting through the air like a soft invitation. After the heat and dust of the morning, anything edible feels like a small miracle. You turn a corner into a shaded courtyard where a clay oven sits glowing orange inside, radiating the kind of warmth that would be cozy if the rest of the world weren't already on maximum toaster. A woman pulls flat rounds of bread from the oven with practiced hands, flipping them onto a reed mat to cool. They hiss softly, steam curling upward. Your stomach growls loud enough that she looks up, amused. She gestures for you to try one. You pick up the still warm piece of bread and take a hopeful bite, only to feel an unexpected crunch. Not a nice crunch, not a fresh baguette crunch, more like sand. Lots of sand. Your teeth grind together like you're chewing a tiny desert. You chew politely anyway because you're grateful, and also because spitting out your first ancient Egyptian gift would probably be frowned upon. You swallow. You can practically hear your dentist screaming across millennia. A mainstream fact drifts across your mind as you rub your jaw. Ancient Egyptian bread often contained grit from grinding stones. People literally wore down their molars over a lifetime. You are currently fast-tracking that experience in a single morning. You take another bite, carefully, trying to aim for a softer section. No luck. It's all exfoliant. A kid nearby laughs at your face and proudly waves his own gritty bread around like it's nothing. You manage a thumbs up. Your dignity is debatable. Someone hands you a small bowl next, thick, earthy, and clearly meant to complement the bread. You sniff it. Lentils. Maybe onions. Maybe something else your modern palate wasn't trained for, but that smells strangely comforting. You dip the bread and take a cautious bite. Better. Much better. You relax a little. Then someone gives you water. Or something that claims to be water. You peer inside the clay cup. The liquid is slightly cloudy, suspiciously cloudy. You swirl it gently. The cloudiness swirls back like it has ambitions.
You sniff. It smells fine. Mostly. You glance around. Every villager gulps it down without hesitation. You take the smallest sip possible and immediately experience the flavor of river, with notes of whatever upstream neighbors are doing. Your eyebrows rise. You try not to gag. Hydration is hydration, you remind yourself again. But wow, your modern stomach is not going to accept this without filing a formal complaint.
To your relief, someone else hands you another cup, this time filled with a mildly sweet, slightly fermented drink. Beer. Ancient Egyptian beer wasn't like your modern crisp lager. It was thick, cloudy, and often used as a staple beverage because it was safer than raw water. You take a sip, and it's shockingly decent. Yeasty, earthy, almost like a liquid loaf of bread. A man grins proudly at your reaction, as if he brewed it himself. You raise the cup in thanks. He nods like you just passed a test. But the food surprises keep coming. A woman sets down a basket of dates, sticky, brown, sun-softened. You pop one in your mouth, delighted at the burst of sweetness. Finally, something without sand. Then you hear a honking sound behind you and turn just in time to see a goose strut around the courtyard like it owns the property. It pecks at your sandal, hard. You hop backward with a squeak you hope wasn't audible. The goose is unimpressed. It pecks again. A farmer chuckles and waves it off, muttering something that sounds like a fond insult. A quirky tidbit you once read surfaces. Egyptians considered geese valuable livestock, but also kind of dangerous. They appear in art as serene symbols of plenty, but in reality, they're feathery little tyrants. You take refuge near a shade wall and continue eating your sandy bread, dipping it into lentils, biting cautiously like someone who's already chipped a tooth this morning. A woman beside you mixes something in a small bowl, herbs, garlic, coriander. She hands you a pinch to taste. It's pungent, savory, almost spicy in a way that tingles your tongue. You nod appreciatively, eyes watering slightly. She laughs warmly. You laugh too, fanning your mouth. Not everything on offer is familiar. A man approaches carrying dried fish, small, salty, pungent. You take the tiniest bite possible. The flavor hits like a concentrated ocean punch to the face. You nod again politely, while your taste buds attempt to reboot. Someone else brings cucumbers from a basket, cool and crisp. You bite into one greedily, almost spiritual in your relief. The woman with the herbs laughs again, probably thinking you've never appreciated a cucumber so intensely in your life. She's right. You're starting to realize something important. Food here isn't bad, it's just unpredictable. Wonderful one moment, gritty or questionable the next. And everything is tied directly to the Nile. Crops, silt, fish, herbs, livestock. This whole civilization is one enormous, edible thank you letter to a river. You wipe your hands on your linen wrap and stand to stretch. The sun is climbing higher, and the courtyard's shade is shrinking by the minute. People move quickly now, finishing food before heading to their long list of tasks. Meanwhile, you're still trying to remove a grain of sand wedged between your molars. A man gestures for you to sit near a low table with a group of workers. They tear bread, dip it, pass bowls, share everything without hesitation. Communal eating isn't just tradition, it's survival. You join them, trying to mimic their rhythm. Rip, dip, bite. Rip, dip, swallow. You almost miss your mouth once. The man beside you pretends not to notice. You appreciate his kindness. Someone places a small clay pot near you, lifting the lid with a flourish. Inside is something grayish, mushy, possibly made of fermented beans. You have no idea. The group encourages you to try. You smile weakly. You poke it with your bread. It clings like glue. You take a deep breath, dip again, and bring it to your mouth. It's okay. Sort of. Your palate is confused. Your brain is confused. Your stomach files a second complaint. You smile bravely. And as you sit there chewing your questionable but not terrible breakfast, a scholarly debate you once overheard pops into your mind. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian diet was nutritious or monotonous. Based on your current culinary experience, the answer is yes, to both, somehow. After the meal, you step outside the courtyard and immediately feel the sun's heat intensify. The ground radiates warmth through your sandals. You instinctively reach for your water jar, already nearly empty. A worker walking beside you shakes his head gently and hands you a shared jar instead. You take a sip of the cloudy but now slightly more tolerable water. He nods approvingly. As the village disperses, you wander toward a cluster of small market stalls. Just a few mats laid out with produce and pottery. A vendor offers you figs. You accept eagerly. They're sweet, soft, delightful. You savor them slowly, grateful for a moment of pure pleasure. Then you accidentally bite into a fig that contains a tiny seed cluster, hard enough to make your tooth vibrate. You sigh. So close. You stroll on, nibbling cautiously, observing everything. Chickens pecking at grain. Women kneading dough with strong, practiced arms. Children snatching bits of leftover bread. Dogs stealing whatever the children drop. The economy of food here is constant motion. Harvest, grind, bake, share, repeat. You pass a pot of barley soaking in water and smell the faint sourness of beer starting to ferment. You inhale deeply, amused by how comforting it's becoming. You're genuinely bonding with the ancient beer. This wasn't on your 2025 bingo card. Your stomach grumbles again, this time not with hunger, but with uncertainty. You give it a gentle pat. It's okay, you tell yourself silently. We'll negotiate. Whether your stomach agrees remains unclear. The heat continues climbing, and breakfast settles like a heavy stone. You wipe sweat from your brow, adjust your linen wrap, and realize something profound. You've been awake for only a few hours, and already the combination of gritty food, questionable water, and relentless sun has you feeling like you've lived through a full day. You take one last sip of cloudy water and catch your reflection faintly in the surface. Dusty face, squinting eyes, hair sticking out in ways you didn't know hair could stick out. You look absolutely, magnificently unprepared for ancient Egypt. And breakfast was just the beginning. You leave the courtyard behind, brushing crumbs from your linen wrap and tugging your sandals tighter as you follow a cluster of villagers moving toward the river. The sun is now a bright coin hung overhead, warming your shoulders, and the air has shifted from pretty warm to lightly threatening. The Nile glimmers ahead, wide, shimmering, confident, like it knows it's the reason every living thing around you exists. You're headed toward the fields, even though no one explicitly told you to go there. Everyone else is going, and in ancient Egypt, standing around doing nothing in full view of hardworking farmers feels morally questionable. So you shuffle along, trying to blend in, even though blending in stopped being an option somewhere between your first sneeze and your first goose ambush. Before you even reach the fields, you hear the rhythmic sound of wooden plows scraping against the soil. The ground here is darker, rich, almost black. because this is the gift of the flood. A mainstream fact taps you on the shoulder. Every year, the Nile floods its banks, leaving behind nutrient-rich silt that turns this region into one of the most fertile agricultural zones of the ancient world. The silt is thick under your sandals now, soft enough that your feet sink an inch or two with every step. It feels cool, but also a little like walking through chocolate pudding someone left out in the sun. Several farmers eye you curiously as you pass. Not suspicious, just assessing you in the same way one might assess a goat wearing a tiny hat. Strange, interesting, probably harmless. One of them gestures toward a wooden hoe lying nearby. You wave your hands in a polite, "Oh no thank you, I merely exist" gesture, but he insists. You sigh. You pick it up. It is heavy, shockingly heavy. Your wrists bend slightly under the weight. You try to imitate the proper motion. Raise, pull, lift, scrape. The hoe digs into the soil a grand total of 1 centimeter before getting stuck like a spoon in cold ice cream. The farmer chuckles softly and takes it back. You pretend you loosened it for him. He pretends to believe you. A pair of oxen plod past, their horns capped with small wooden guards, dragging a plow guided by 2 men. You sidestep quickly because the oxen absolutely did not see you, do not plan to see you, and would probably walk through you like you were decorative mist. Their hooves splash through patches of shallow water left over from irrigation channels, spraying mud on your legs. It's warm. You grimace. A child nearby points at your mud-splattered calves and cackles. He mimics your earlier dramatic "ah" noise perfectly again. He's getting too good at it. As you walk deeper into the agricultural area, you notice a network of low earthen ridges dividing fields into neat rectangles. This is the irrigation system. Simple, sophisticated, essential. Workers open and close small channels using clumps of mud, guiding water wherever it's needed. One man gestures for you to try pushing a ridge into place. You kneel, scoop up a heavy lump of sopping mud, and attempt to pry it into the gap. It collapses instantly, splashing water into your lap. The workers laugh, not unkindly, just honestly. Another worker demonstrates. He slaps a chunk of mud with the confidence of someone who has done this every day since childhood. It sticks perfectly, sealing the channel. He gives you a nod of encouragement. You try again. Your mud falls apart again. You accept defeat. You follow a group of farmers toward a cluster of tall, golden stalks that sway softly in the breeze. Wheat, barley, the backbone of Egyptian life. The farmers use curved sickles inset with sharp flint teeth, sweeping them through the grain with elegant precision. The flint glints in the sunlight, each movement efficient, practiced, almost graceful. You stare, mesmerized. And then, someone hands you a sickle. No thank you. You know your limits, and they are flint-based. But they insist, so you grip the handle awkwardly. The curve fits your palm nicely, but the weight and the responsibility is intimidating. You swing at a cluster of stalks. Nothing happens. You swing again, harder. You manage to bend a few. The farmer watching you politely hides a smile. You finally succeed in cutting 3 stalks. 3. Meanwhile, the worker beside you has cut an entire armful in the time it took you to adjust your grip twice, contemplate life choices, and apologize internally to the wheat. Still, you gather your 3 stalks proudly. The child claps sarcastically. You bow. As the hours stretch on, the heat becomes its own character. Loud, unforgiving, insistent. The air shimmer rises from the soil in wavy lines. Your sweat evaporates before it even forms properly. You feel like a raisin pretending to be a person. Ancient Egyptians move with the rhythm of people who understand their land intimately. They pace themselves. They drink often. They shade their heads with linen wraps that look suspiciously more secure than yours. You try tightening yours again. It slides down over one eye. You push it back. A farmer watching you shakes his head with a smile and fixes it in place for the 3rd time today. Then you notice something odd. A small shrine at the edge of the field, decorated with carved stones and small offerings. Bread, onions, flowers. A woman touches the shrine lightly before beginning her work, whispering a short phrase. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Egyptians often place tiny field shrines to ensure good harvests and keep harmful spirits and hungry rodents away. The belief system here blends seamlessly with daily labor. Sacred and practical are neighbors.
For a moment, you stand there, letting the atmosphere sink in. Sunlight, soft wind, earthy smells, the distant sounds of the river. Farming in ancient Egypt isn't just work, it's survival braided with tradition. And yet the scholarly debate echoes faintly again. Historians still argue whether most Egyptian farmers lived comfortably or struggled constantly. As you watch them work, tireless, skilled, enduring, you realize both can be true at the same time.
A sudden rustle draws your attention. Something small moves between your feet. You freeze. A field mouse darts past you, carrying a stolen grain kernel twice its size. It gives you a look of pure defiance before disappearing into a tiny hole. You gasp in betrayal. A woman near you laughs and points at a wooden trap set nearby. Rodent control is serious business here. Cats patrol the fields, lean and focused. One pounces and misses. The mouse wins again. The cats seem unimpressed with your judging.
Your stomach rumbles faintly from all the earlier culinary adventures. You wipe your forehead again and notice your arm is coated in a layer of silt, sweat, and dust. It feels like nature's version of a spa treatment, if the spa was chaotic, extremely warm, and supervised by a goose. The farmers break briefly, gathering under a shady patch of palm trees. You join them gratefully. Someone hands you a handful of lupine beans. You bite into one. It's bitter, very bitter. Everyone else eats them casually, like they aren't tiny edible pranks. You swallow anyway, nodding bravely. A child offers you a fig leaf to fan yourself. You accept and fan dramatically. The kid giggles. The breeze feels heavenly. You hear someone nearby humming, a low, rhythmic melody that blends perfectly with the rustling fields and chirping birds. It's hypnotic. For a moment, you close your eyes and just listen, letting the heat and sounds swirl into a sleepy haze. Then, a fly lands on your nose. You snorted it off like an annoyed donkey, startling yourself awake again. As the workers rise to continue their tasks, you push yourself up too, even though every muscle in your body is starting to file complaints. The farmers seem only gently warmed by the sun, while you feel like you've been slow roasted. You try helping with gathering bundles. You lift one, you drop it immediately. A woman picks it up with one arm like it weighs nothing. You follow her, humbled. Your sandals squish in the damp soil. Your linen sticks to your back. The sun beats down relentlessly. And through all of it, the farmers keep moving, steadily, methodically, wisely conserving their strength. You look at the tools, the fields, the irrigation channels, the endless tasks, and you suddenly understand the quiet truth of this place. Agriculture isn't just work, it's an endurance test written into the landscape. And you are, without question, failing it spectacularly. By midday, your legs tremble, your back aches, your arms feel like overcooked noodles, and you still have hours of daylight left. Ancient Egypt doesn't just test your strength, it tests your will to keep going. You step away from the glare of the main path and drift into the narrow lanes of a modest Egyptian village. And the moment you do, your senses readjust. The air changes first. Not cooler, unfortunately, just different. It's heavier with the scent of mudbrick, dried reeds, baking bread, and a surprising undertone of livestock musk that seems to cling to every corner. You try to take a deep, calming breath, but the mix lands somewhere between earthy and please let me get used to this soon. Still, as you continue forward, you find a certain rhythm in the way the village hums, like a slow, dusty heartbeat tapping under your feet. The houses rise on both sides of you, packed close, their walls built from mud brick shaped by hand, literally hand-shaped
because you can still see the faint ridges from where workers pressed and smoothed them. Mainstream fact, mudbrick was the essential building material for most Egyptian homes, an efficient blend of Nile mud and straw dried under the relentless sun. To you, though, it feels less like an architectural choice and more like walking through a cluster of small ovens arranged conveniently to maximize your sweating. Every wall radiates heat like a toaster you forgot to unplug. A few villagers glance your way, curious at your clumsy attempts to blend in. You nod with what you hope is a universal friendly neighbor face, though you suspect it lands more in the category of lost tourist melting under the sun. Someone leads a goat through the lane, and the animal looks at you with the kind of skepticism that only goats and toddlers can perfect. You return the look, and it huffs as if you've personally inconvenienced it. That's joke one. Not even the wildlife respects your modern confidence here. As you walk deeper in, you notice how cramped everything feels. The lanes twist and tighten, creating pockets of shade you instinctively cling to. Overhead, woven reed mats stretch between rooftops, a clever way villagers soften the sun's assault. Historians still argue whether these coverings were primarily about shade or also helped with privacy and airflow. Either way, you silently thank whoever first said, "Hey, let's put some mats out before we melt." Inside one doorway, a family sits on the floor, shaping dough on a small surface, rolling it with quick, practiced movements. You catch a glimpse of a grindstone. Yes, the infamous quernstone that has already destroyed your fantasies of effortless ancient living in earlier sections. Here, you also spot a basket of what looks like herbs or crushed plants. A fringe tidbit, villagers sometimes dried animal dung into small cakes used as fuel, which explains why the cooking fire doesn't smell quite like you'd expect from a cozy home kitchen back in your century. You're invited to step inside for a moment, though invited is generous. The woman gestures, and you realize refusing would be more awkward than navigating whatever cultural foot trap you're about to stumble into. The interior of the house surprises you. It's dim but cool enough to grant a tiny reprieve, like stepping into a clay refrigerator that forgot how to refrigerate, but at least remembered to stop punching you with sunlight. The walls are smooth and plain, decorated with simple niches for small objects or offerings. A few clay vessels line the floor, water jars, grain containers, and pots sealed with mud to keep insects out. You watch a child scoop water from one jar with a dipper carved from a gourd. The water looks slightly cloudy, but apparently it's clean by local standards. After all, it's filtered through ceramic, an ingenious solution in a world where fresh water is precious. You politely decline the offer to drink, pretending you're still full, though you know the real reason is that your stomach would stage an uprising before sundown. Outside again, the village comes alive with new details. Chickens dart across your path with the unearned confidence of creatures that know exactly how many ankles they've terrorized over the years. A few men repair a fishing net on low stools, chatting in a relaxed tone. You can't help noticing the net is made from tightly twisted flax fibers, another testament to how many uses Egyptians found for the humble flax plant. You pass a 2-story house, and it jolts you for a moment. Not because it's fancy, it's still very much mudbrick, but because the second floor looks almost airy compared to the cramped lower rooms. A wooden ladder leads up to it, though ladder might be optimistic. It's closer to a vertical suggestion made of sticks and hope. Still, multi-story homes were relatively common in denser villages, maximizing space without stretching too far into limited farmland. A man waves at you from a rooftop where he seems to be spreading something onto a mat. You squint. Is it fish? No, dates, seeds. Or, fringe tidbit number 2. Drying dung patties for fuel is a rooftop job, and though you prayed otherwise, you're looking at them right now. You immediately rethink every breeze that has touched your face since entering the village. As you continue your meandering tour, you find yourself observing the tools people use. Wooden hoes with forked ends, bronze blades dulled by years of service. Reed baskets woven so tightly they look more durable than some modern tote bags. Everything here carries the patina of labor. Real, physical, exhausting work you can practically feel radiating off the objects. Even the children at play mimic adult tasks. One pretends to pound grain, another pretends to herd invisible goats. You can't help but smile, though the sweat dripping down your back threatens to turn that smile into a grimace. Someone offers you a seat near a small clay bench. You sit, expecting a moment of relief, but instead, the bench radiates a warm, baked temperature that suggests it's been sunbathing since the dawn of civilization. You shift awkwardly, then stand again, pretending you suddenly remembered something extremely important to do elsewhere. Joke 2. Even the furniture here is trying to roast you alive. A few steps farther, you encounter something unexpected, an open courtyard shared by several families. Small gardens sprout in clay pots, growing herbs like dill and coriander. Mainstream fact: Egyptians often kept household gardens or small communal plots, cultivating plants for cooking, medicine, and rituals. You touch one of the leaves, inhaling its surprisingly fresh scent. For a moment, the world feels gentler, softened by the rustle of plants and the shade of a leaning palm tree. Then a gust of wind blows sand into your eye. You blink rapidly, making a tiny annoyed squeak you hope no one heard. That's joke 3, and a reminder that nature here has zero interest in your comfort. The deeper you go, the more you understand how interconnected everything is. Homes touching homes, families sharing chores, noise echoing through alleys, smells blending in the air. Privacy, as you know it today, simply isn't part of the equation. You overhear slices of conversations. Someone complaining about a lazy goat, someone arguing about irrigation schedules, children whispering conspiratorially about sneaking honey cakes. It's all so alive, so busy, so close. The walls compress around you, like the village itself is giving you a warm, dusty hug you didn't ask for. And then you glance down and notice the ground beneath your feet, a mix of packed earth, scattered straw, and the occasional droppings left by animals who clearly see no need to adjust their behavior for passing humans. You step side carefully, though probably too slowly, because someone chuckles at your overdramatic hop. Your modern brain insists, this is too much, but your wandering soul whispers, this is real life, raw, tactile, connected. And somewhere between those two voices, you realize why it's so difficult for a time traveler like you to fit in. Every detail, the smells, the textures, the sounds, the heat, reminds you that this world isn't built for your expectations. It's tough, vibrant, and unfiltered. Still, you continue walking through the village, adjusting your steps, learning its rhythm, and accepting that if the dung-fired cooking smoke or curious goat stares don't scare you off, you might actually start to appreciate the strange charm of this ancient community. You barely make it past the last cluster of mud-brick homes before the day grabs you by the shoulders and reminds you that ancient Egypt expects you to work. Yes, you, the visitor who thought you might get away with wandering around like some timeless tourist. Here, every pair of hands counts, and unfortunately for you, your modern hands are about to get a very rude awakening. A farmer waves you over with a grin that's far too cheerful for someone standing under the full force of the Egyptian sun. You try to pretend you don't see him. Classic modern survival strategy, but no luck. He calls again, louder, and suddenly you are being handed a wooden hoe, the kind with a bent, forked end that looks like it was crafted from a stick, a rock, and pure stubbornness. You take the tool politely, giving it a test swing that immediately tells your spine, we're in danger. The handle vibrates from your awkward grip, and the farmer laughs, not unkindly, but with the unmistakable recognition of a man who has seen this exact disaster unfold before. Joke 1, congratulations. You've gone from time traveler to village entertainment. The field stretches out before you in rows of dark, freshly irrigated soil. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptian agriculture relied heavily on basin irrigation, where fields were flooded by canals after the Nile's inundation. Right now, the ground squishes under your sandals, cool in some places, and absolutely determined to suck your shoes off in others. You step carefully, but not carefully enough. Your heel sinks, the mud grabs you, and for a moment you flail like someone fighting an invisible swamp monster. The farmer reaches out to steady you, shaking his head with a grin. Just walk, his gesture seems to say. Stop negotiating with the mud. You try, you really do, but every step feels like a silent argument between gravity, clay, and your dignity. A group of workers is already bent over the soil, planting seeds, repairing ridges, and clearing clumps that didn't settle evenly after irrigation. Their motions flow like choreography: bend, smooth, lift, step. You copy them, attempting to blend in, only to discover that your lower back is already staging a protest rally. The hoe is heavier than it looks, the earth is stubborn, and your arms? They're starting to feel like warm noodles left in the sun too long. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian laborer had a significantly stronger physique due to lifelong manual work, or if modern assumptions exaggerate their muscle tone. All you know is that every single person around you seems made of bronze and sinew, while you feel like you're made of laundry that hasn't fully dried. A woman nearby is grinding grain on a cornstone. You've learned this is one of the most physically punishing daily tasks in the ancient world. Archaeologists have found telltale signs of joint damage in skeletons, especially in the knees and back, from years spent kneeling at grindstones. She pushes the smaller handstone back and forth with a steady rhythm, the sound rasping like soft sand against a window. She nods at you. You nod back. You last all of 10 seconds before realizing your wrists are plotting their escape. Fringe tidbit. Some workers would spit or sprinkle a tiny bit of water on the grindstone to keep grain particles from flying into their eyes, a trick you attempt now, only to miss horribly and end up with warm Egyptian dust stuck to your chin. Charming. You decide maybe another task will be more your speed. The farmer gestures toward a basket of flax stems. Flax is essential here, turned into linen, rope, nets, and more. Your job, apparently, is to help pull the dried stems apart. Easy, right? No heavy lifting, no bending, no mud trying to eat your feet. You grab the stems and pull. Nothing. You grab again, pull harder. Still nothing. You look at your hands like they betrayed you personally. The farmer steps over, takes the same bundle, and splits it cleanly with one swift motion. You mutter something about it being a warm-up attempt and try again, this time managing a tear only because half the stems break messily, spraying dusty fibers into your face. Joke 2, you've successfully lost a fight to a plant. Workers nearby chuckle, not in a mean way, just in a look at this adorable disaster way. You can't even be embarrassed. You're too busy coughing up flax dust. Trying once more to be helpful, you move toward a group clearing weeds along the irrigation channels. The men use simple wooden scrapers to remove silt and debris. It looks, from a distance, straightforward. Up close, however, it becomes painfully clear just how strong these workers are. The silt is dense, the channels are deep, and the sun is actively trying to reduce you to a puddle of regret. 10 minutes in, sweat drips into your eyes as if your face is leaking. You straighten your back, and it pops loudly enough that even a nearby donkey looks at you like, "You good?" You nod reflexively, because apparently you're now taking judgment from livestock. But the fatigue isn't the worst part. No, that honor belongs to the bugs. Small, persistent flies hover around your face like they've mistaken you for the world's least interesting celebrity. Mosquitoes, ever enthusiastic, claim your ankles as their personal buffet. Fringe tidbit number 2. Some workers smeared a mixture of oils or fat combined with ground herbs to repel insects, but the recipe varied wildly. Without a proper mixture, you resort to waving your hands around like orchestra made of gnats. The workers don't flinch. They've lived with these pests all their lives. You, on the other hand, are about 5 minutes away from filing a formal complaint with the manager of ancient Egypt. A young boy arrives carrying a jug of water. You watch as workers take turns sipping from the rim, sharing without hesitation. When the jug reaches you, you pause. The water is slightly sandy, possibly warm, maybe questionable, but you're so thirsty that you risk it, taking a small sip that tastes faintly like clay and sun. Refreshing? Not exactly, but survivable. Mainstream fact: farmers often carried water in ceramic vessels, relying on evaporation through the porous surface to cool it. Yours is only slightly cool, more like room temperature with a dream of being refreshing someday. As the hours drag on, your body starts inventing new complaints, shoulders stiffening, palms reddening, neck burning under the sun, despite your best attempts to hide in your own shadow. The workers, meanwhile, keep going with steady, practiced energy. They talk, laugh, sing occasionally, songs with simple melodies that weave through the open fields. You try to follow the rhythm, but quickly lose track, your mind drifting like the dust swirling at your feet. You attempt one last task before giving up entirely, tying bundles of harvested reeds together. This seems simple enough, but you tie one too loosely, another too tightly, and a third so unevenly that the farmer gives you a look best translated as incredible. Truly incredible. Not impressed, just marveling at the spectacle of your incompetence. Joke 3. At this point, you're no longer working with the farmers. You're working against the concept of productivity itself.
By midday, your skin is flushed, your muscles wobbly, and your pride thoroughly stomped into the mud. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just labor, it's life. Day in, day out. A cycle of rising with the sun, working until exhaustion, and repeating, without the luxury of rest days or ergonomic tools. The modern world has spoiled you with machines, cushioned chairs, hydration reminders, and the sacred ritual of lunch breaks that last longer than a sneeze. Here, the work simply continues.
You drag yourself back toward the village, wobbling with each step, silently acknowledging the truth. The farmers didn't just outperform you, they did it with ease. And while you strain, gasp, and sweat like someone climbing a mountain, they move through their tasks as naturally as you breathe. Ancient Egypt doesn't pamper you. It shapes you, tests you, and today at least, utters a gentle, dusty laugh at your expense. You barely make it back from the fields before something else in ancient Egypt sweeps you up. Not heat this time, not sand, not a goat that thinks it owns the road. No, this time it's the sheer, unavoidable presence of religion. It's everywhere. Not in a heavy-handed way, but in the way air or sound works, constant, woven into everything, impossible to ignore even if you tried. And you quickly realize that navigating this landscape of gods, spirits, rituals, symbols, and taboos feels like stepping into a living tapestry that keeps moving around you. You wander through the village as the afternoon sun softens ever so slightly, though not enough to forgive the earlier insults it inflicted on your skin. A man walks past carrying a small loaf of bread and a clay dish. At first, you think it's just a snack, until he places them carefully before a tiny shrine built into the outside wall of a home. Mainstream historical fact: many Egyptian households kept small altars for offering food, incense, or flowers to household gods, like Bes or Taweret, protectors of childbirth, domesticity, or general well-being. You pause, watching him as he straightens the loaf with a deliberate touch before stepping away. He doesn't look around for approval. He doesn't explain himself. He simply acts, as naturally as you might plug in your phone at night. Meanwhile, you stand there thinking, if I leave bread outside my apartment in the modern world, raccoons eat it. Different times, different stakes. The truth hits you. In ancient Egypt, the divine isn't abstract. It's in the corners of rooms, in carved eyes on door lintels, in amulets tucked into belts, in the rhythm of daily chores. You feel eyes on you, not human ones, but painted ones, literally. Doors, coffins, pottery, and even boats sometimes display the wide, stylized eye of Horus, meant to see, to guard, to guide. You try to play it cool, but passing under a doorway with giant protective eyes does make you straighten your posture like you're being judged. A woman steps up to you, offering a small amulet shaped like a Wadjet eye, Horus's protective symbol. You accept it carefully, trying not to drop it, which immediately makes you look suspiciously incompetent with tiny objects. Joke 1. Ancient Egypt has now declared you least coordinated villager of the year, and you've barely been here a day. She ties the amulet around your wrist with a gentle nod, The cord is rough, a bit scratchy, and smells faintly of smoke. She explains, through gesture more than words, that it will protect you from harm. You smile, grateful, even if part of you isn't sure whether you're being blessed or politely told, you look spiritually fragile.
You continue walking, and that's when you start noticing the shrines everywhere. A little niche carved into a wall with a simple clay figurine, a painted cobra symbol above a doorway, even a tiny statue tucked behind an oil jar. Fringe tidbit? Some figurines that show up in homes look odd to modern eyes. Flat little wooden silhouettes with raised arms. Scholars think they could represent ancestor spirits, fertility symbols, or even cheap stand-ins for more elaborate temple statues. No one knows for certain, which is why your brain keeps whispering, are these adorable? Creepy? Both. As you turn down a lane, you encounter a group of villagers gathered around a small makeshift altar. They're burning incense, resinous and thick, the smoke curling upward like lazy serpents. The smell, sweet and a little sharp, catches the back of your throat. Someone hums a tune, low and rhythmic. You can't identify the melody, but the repetition feels soothing, like the kind of sound that helps you think less and float more. Historians still argue whether daily public rituals in smaller villages followed strict temple protocol, or if villagers improvised their own versions. From what you're seeing, this feels deeply personal, equal parts community gathering and spiritual maintenance.
You're motioned closer. You hesitate, unsure what the right protocol is. Bow, kneel, wave awkwardly. You settle for a respectful stillness, hoping it translates across 3,000 years of cultural difference. An older man, clearly someone with authority, maybe a local priest or simply the community's ritual expert, offers you a small pinch of grain. You look at it like it's a test question. Are you supposed to eat it, throw it, sprinkle it? Thankfully, he gestures toward a dish on the altar, and you place the grain inside gently, as though setting down a fragile treasure. Everyone nods approvingly. You breathe again. As the little ceremony unfolds, you notice symbols painted on pottery, depictions of Hathor with cow ears, images of Ra's sun disk, protective serpents encircling patterns. You don't need explanations to sense the meaning. The village lives inside a web of cosmic order, Ma'at, the principle of harmony. And even though you've only been here briefly, you can feel the pressure to maintain that order. Not as a stress, exactly, but as a constant responsibility that shapes every movement. Someone hands you a small bouquet of herbs, fresh, green, slightly fuzzy. You sniff it and immediately sneeze. Joke 2, nothing breaks the solemnity of ancient ritual quite like you nearly launching your soul out through your nose. The villagers chuckle softly. It's fine, you're trying. And in a world where the divine is always near, good intent matters. You follow the group toward the edge of the village, where a small water channel glitters in the afternoon light. The priest kneels, dipping his hands into the canal and letting the water drip through his fingers. It's a cleansing act, symbolic rather than practical. You mimic the motion, letting the cool water slip across your palms. It feels good, fresh, gentle, calming. Mainstream fact. Water held immense symbolic meaning for Egyptians. The Nile wasn't just a river, it was life, renewal, a link to creation myths. Ritual washing appeared in both daily routines and religious rites, especially before handling sacred objects. While you're lost in that thought, something small brushes against your ankle. You jolt, convinced it's a snake or an angry fish spirit, or, well, it's a frog, a tiny one. It hops away, leaving you standing there trying to reclaim your dignity. Joke 3. Animals in ancient Egypt don't care about your emotional stability. But frogs themselves were symbols of fertility and regeneration, associated with the goddess Hecate. Suddenly, your awkward moment feels almost blessed. That might be generous, but you're willing to accept any spiritual win available. The priest draws a simple shape in the damp earth, a looping symbol you recognize as a Shen ring, representing eternity and protection. He gestures at it, then at you, smiling.
You nod, trying to look enlightened, even though you're mostly thinking, is this my first ancient religious badge? Do I level up now? As the group disperses, you linger with the quiet sense that you've stepped into a world where divine presence isn't distant or occasional. It's constant. A gentle pressure on your shoulder, a whisper in the wind, a symbol painted on a pot that reminds you you're part of something larger.
Even walking through a simple courtyard feels charged. You spot a child wearing an amulet shaped like the dwarf god Bes, protector of children, household humor, and beating away evil spirits. The kid scrunches his face at you, mimicking the fierce expression of the amulet. You smile back. Bes would approve. The sun sinks lower. Long shadows stretch across walls covered with faded streaks of red and yellow pigment, leftover traces of protective symbols once painted brightly. The colors linger like quiet echoes, reminding you that time may fade paint, but meaning stays. You realize that in this world, you can avoid picking up a hoe or grinding grain or fighting the clay soil, but you can't avoid the gods. They are stitched into the fabric of daily life. They live in the air you breathe. They are the invisible companions of every villager's steps. And now, in a small way, they've become part of your day too.
You follow the dusty path curling away from the village, and with every step, the landscape shifts from cramped mudbrick walls to wide, shimmering fields.
It's from a river that dictates the rhythm of an entire civilization. But what you find instead is an almost hypnotic calm. Not peaceful in a modern spa day kind of way, more like this river could feed you or swallow your crops whole, depending on its mood. Comforting.
This is the beating heart of ancient Egypt, predictable cycles of life shaped by the Nile's floodwaters. Mainstream historical fact, the inundation season, called Akhet, soaked the farmlands with nutrient-rich silt, creating some of the most fertile agricultural land in the ancient world. Without it, there is no Egypt.
You edge closer to the water, enjoying the breeze. Finally, a breeze that doesn't feel like someone holding a hot oven door open in your face. But then your sandal lands on a slick patch of mud near the bank, and suddenly you're skidding in a slow, flailing disaster arc. You catch yourself at the last second, arms waving wildly. A fisherman nearby pauses mid-net pull to watch in mild amusement. Joke 1, congratulations, your graceful near faceplant just became riverside entertainment. You try to play it off by pretending you meant to do a balance test. The fisherman snorts, shaking his head.
The riverbank is alive with activity. Groups of farmers inspect small channels branching from the Nile, adjusting the flow with wooden shovels and levees made of packed earth. You marvel at how the water is guided with an understanding born from generations of trial and error. No flashy engineering degrees, no apps, no sensors, just intuition, experience, and actual physical labor. Your modern brain whispers something in hydrology models. The farmers politely ignore your entire vibe.
You kneel beside a patch of dark soil, scooping a handful. It's rich, cool, almost silky, a perfect mixture of silt and clay. This is the gift of the Nile, and it smells faintly damp, like river moss and warm earth. You rub it between your fingers, wondering how many harvests it has fed. But not everything with the Nile is poetic. A few steps farther, you spot a fisherman hauling in a net, only to reveal a muddy, wriggling mass of river creatures. Some you recognize, fish. Others, not so much. Fringe tidbit, Egyptians also caught river turtles, eels, and even Nile perch the size of your torso. You stare at one of the stranger, snake-like fish writhing in the net, and it stares back with what can only be described as prehistoric attitude. You immediately decide you will not be making eye contact with any more fish today. As you walk along the shoreline, a chorus of squawks erupts overhead. Birds, dozens of them, flap and squabble, some landing near reeds, others diving after fish. Herons, storks, maybe an ibis or two. The ibis especially catches your attention. Its curved beak gives it an elegant, purposeful look. No surprise then that Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom, was often depicted as an ibis. You try to admire one gracefully perched in the shallows, but it suddenly screeches and startles you so badly you yelp. Joke 2. The sacred bird of wisdom just bullied you. As you recover your dignity, you notice several men building something near the water. Large baskets woven from reeds. They're deep and sturdy, shaped almost like thick, flexible cones. One man wears a bundle of them slung over his shoulder like he's headed to a very rustic flea market. These are fish traps, designed so fish can enter but not escape. Historians still argue whether some of these basket trap designs were standardized or varied regionally, depending on reed availability and local river conditions. Judging by the assortment here, different shapes, patterns, knots, you're guessing the answer is yes, and also no. Go argue about it in a symposium. Feeling brave, you step closer to the Nile itself, letting the cool water lick over your toes. It's refreshing, especially after your earlier adventures in heat and labor. But then, you see something slide under the surface about 10 feet away. Something long, something scaly, something with a slow, deliberate movement. You freeze. The fisherman glances over, sees your expression, and bursts out laughing. He gestures reassuringly. Probably just a big fish or a harmless reptile, right? Right? Mainstream historical fact. Crocodiles did inhabit many parts of the Nile in ancient times, especially farther south near Nubia, though they weren't equally common everywhere. People respected them, feared them, and even worshipped Sobek, the crocodile god. You take 3 polite steps backward anyway. Along the bank, reed boats glide past, propelled by men using double-ended paddles. They're small, lightweight, and surprisingly elegant. The reeds, they tell you, are bundled, dried, and lashed together so tightly that they form buoyant shapes strong enough to carry people downriver. Watching the boats skim across the water, you feel a pang of appreciation. No engines, no fiberglass, just nature, shaped by skillful hands. A boatman gestures toward you, offering a short ride. You climb in cautiously, expecting it to wobble like an inflatable pool toy. Instead, it steadies beneath your weight. You sit cross-legged, trying your best not to shift your balance too dramatically. A child paddles nearby, flawlessly, as though born atop the water. Your paddle dips into the Nile, and the river responds with calm resistance. Gentle, even soothing. For a moment, you forget how unforgiving today has been. Then a splash erupts next to the boat, a fish leaping free from the surface like it's staging a dramatic escape scene. You flinch so hard the boat rocks. The child laughs, steadies you with one hand, and continues paddling without missing a beat. Joke 3. You have now been saved by a small child with superior aquatic skills. As the boat glides along, you see evidence of the Nile's importance everywhere. Farmers marking water levels on posts. Children learning to swim near the bank. Women washing linen in shallow areas. Even a man carving something, a small figurine of Sobek, the crocodile god. His hands work with absolute focus, shaping the snout, smoothing the back. The reverence in his movements is unmistakable. The Nile isn't just a source of water. It's an entire worldview, a teacher, a provider, a threat, a miracle. And every Egyptian knows where they stand in relation to it. Humbly, the boat circles back to shore, and you step off, your legs wobbling like you've just returned from a long amusement park ride. The fisherman gives you a friendly pat on the back, as if to say, "Not bad for someone who almost fell in 3 times." As you walk the riverbank one last time, the colors shift around you. The sky is turning golden. The reeds glow. The water ripples like beaten bronze. You inhale deeply, taking in the layered scents: damp clay, warm sand, growing crops, and distant cooking fires. It's breathtaking, and overwhelming, and beautiful, and absolutely a place where your modern self wouldn't last a full day without embarrassing yourself, but you're definitely trying. You follow the dirt path back toward the village, knowing this river, its quiet power,
its creatures, its rhythm, will be echoing in your thoughts for a long time.
You settle into the rhythm of city life just long enough to start feeling like you've cracked the code. And that's exactly when reality taps you on the shoulder with a gentle, sarcastic little, "Oh no, you haven't." Because now you're stepping into what might be the most unexpectedly stressful part of your day, the local marketplace, where everyone seems to know exactly what they're doing, except you.
You wander toward the noise long before you reach the gate. It's a straight-up sensory parade. Donkey brays echoing between mudbrick walls, women shouting prices over piles of vegetables, sellers smacking dust off baskets, kids weaving between adults, and one very persistent goose that absolutely looks like it has a vendetta against you. You tell yourself you can handle this. You've seen markets, you've bought things before, you know how to do a simple transaction. And yet, as you slip into the narrow aisles, you feel the invisible hand of ancient Egypt reaching down, patting your shoulder, and saying, "You sweet summer child."
But let's start with the basics. You're here because you need bread, fish, some kind of oil, maybe a pot, and if you're being honest, something that smells less like sweaty tomb worker and more like respectable citizen. The problem is currency. Money in the modern sense simply isn't how this world works. Instead, everything runs on barter, grain measurements, and reputation. You stand in front of a baker's stall, eyeing a nice loaf with a golden crust. The baker eyes you back with expert suspicion. That's your first mainstream historical fact. Egyptian marketplaces were highly regulated, but still socially tight-knit, meaning outsiders had to work twice as hard to be trusted.
You pick up a loaf, mistake number one. The baker huffs, lifts a hand, and wags a finger, because apparently, in this part of town, you're supposed to point, not grab. You mutter an apology, trying to sound like someone who totally knew that. You reach for your small pouch of barley, hoping it counts as valuable enough. Fortunately, barley and emmer grain serve as the backbone of daily exchange. Unfortunately, you offer way too much. The baker stares at your handful, the way a modern cashier would stare at someone paying with a brick of gold for a sandwich.
He gestures, mumbling something about Hecate, the standard grain measure. You pretend you understand, casually nodding while your brain frantically tries to do ancient math. Historians still argue whether the average person actually used precise measuring vessels daily, or whether it was more of a close enough system. Based on the baker's face, it is not a close enough kind of morning. You eventually settle the deal, probably losing a week's worth of reasonable pricing, but you walk away with bread that smells like heaven itself, so maybe it's fine. At the next stall, you nearly walk into a man selling fish laid out on palm mats. The heat is already pushing towards sauté mode, so the fish smell is motivationally intense. You crouch, trying not to breathe too deeply, while selecting something that looks reasonably fresh. The fishmonger waves a squishy specimen at you with a proud flourish. You try to smile politely, even though the fish looks like it's lived a full, complex life and is now contemplating taxes in the afterlife.
And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some fish, particularly certain types of Nile catfish, were believed to have protective symbolism. People wore fish-shaped amulets, and some households painted fish on pottery for good luck. You glance around the stall, wondering if the charms help with whatever you're smelling. The fishmonger starts rapid-fire bargaining, gesturing between your barley pouch and his wares. You nod so much your neck cracks, and 10 minutes later you leave with a fish that might still be judging you from beyond the metaphysical veil. By now, you're starting to feel a crowd pressing in. A group of scribes walks past, chatting loudly about tax records and temple inventories, because of course they are. A couple of laborers laugh as one of them tries to lasso a runaway goat. A vendor selling linen pats a stool invitingly, motioning for you to sit and admire the fabric. You decline politely, worried that if you sit, you'll somehow accidentally buy an entire linen wardrobe.
Still, something about the energy here feels oddly charming. The chaos is rhythmic. The voices blend together into a kind of living lullaby. And even though you definitely feel like a time-traveling toddler trying to pretend you're competent, the marketplace buzz brings its own comfort. People greet each other warmly, shout jokes across rows of vegetables, and gossip about everything from temple offerings to who secretly watered their garden with canal water that totally wasn't purified properly. You stop at a pottery stall next, admiring jars painted with simple stripes and lotus designs. The potter gives you a grin that's half salesmanship and half, "I know you're not from around here." He chats as he wraps a small jar you decide to purchase. He tells you, quite proudly, that some potters believe spirits could inhabit poorly fired vessels, causing them to shatter without warning. Whether he's joking or sharing local superstition, you're not totally sure. You buy the jar anyway, hoping you haven't adopted a haunted clay roommate. Moving deeper into the market, you pass a group of women pounding herbs with rhythmic thuds. The air around them smells of mint, fenugreek, and something that reminds you faintly of cinnamon. One woman offers you a sniff of a powdered blend, some kind of early perfumed cosmetic. You nearly sneeze yourself into another dimension, but you smile politely. She laughs, pats your arm, and offers advice you can't understand, but that feels maternal in its delivery. You look around and realize the marketplace is more than just commerce. It's a social network, a news station, a community center. Someone strums a lute-like instrument nearby. A child tugs on your sleeve, asking if you've seen their runaway goose. You point them toward the one that tried to kill you earlier. A man balancing baskets of dates stops to brag about how the floodwaters were especially generous last year. His friend elbows him and counters with, "Historians still argue whether that's actually true," but in a totally ancient Egyptian equivalent tone.
By now, your arms are full. Bread, fish, a tiny, possibly haunted pot, some herbs you didn't even mean to buy but somehow did, and a bundle of reeds a vendor insisted you needed for good order. You're not sure what that means, but you accept them because arguing with an enthusiastic Egyptian grandmother feels like a losing battle.
You squeeze back toward the street, dodging a cart, a toddler, and a chicken with Olympic sprinting ambitions. When you finally reach open air, you breathe deeply. Fresh air, sweet relief. The marketplace has taught you many lessons, most of them variations of, "You absolutely would not last a day here without embarrassing yourself." But you survived. You navigated. You even bought things. Badly, but still. And as you walk away, clutching your warm loaf of bread, you can't help smiling. The chaos lingers behind you, but it stays in your ears like a soft hum. Another reminder that even in the most overwhelming places, there's a rhythm that eventually lulls you into belonging. You leave the marketplace behind, finally escaping the intense swirl of smells, bargaining, and persistent animals, and step onto a quieter street that leads toward the river once more. The late afternoon light has softened the colors of the village, painting the mud brick walls in warm golds and deep shadows. Your muscles ache pleasantly, a subtle reminder that the day's work is far from over, and yet, walking here, you start to appreciate the slower, quieter rhythms of life away from the crowded market. But just because it's quieter doesn't mean it's easier. Ancient Egypt has a way of testing you in every corner, and today, the test is sanitation. You glance down at the narrow alley and immediately notice the layers of evidence: dried mud, scattered straw, and the occasional pile of, well, the inevitable byproducts of livestock and humans alike. Mainstream fact: most Egyptian villages did not have complex sewage systems. Waste was managed manually, either through cesspits or open areas outside homes. You're suddenly hyper-aware of where you step. Each careful placement of your sandal feels like a miniature negotiation with gravity and history, and the stakes are much higher than your modern standards of hygiene would suggest. A child darts past you, giggling, holding what appears to be a small clay cup. You squint, trying to determine whether it's water, mud, or something less forgiving. The kid tosses it at a friend, and it lands with a satisfying plop. You shudder slightly, thinking that your modern immune system would probably file a formal complaint if it had one. Fringe tidbit: some scholars note that Egyptians actually had surprisingly sophisticated practices for cleanliness and personal hygiene, using natron powders and washing stations. Yet open streets and animal waste still made villages a complicated place to traverse safely. You begin to understand why barefoot walking here would be considered a form of courage or foolishness. depending on who's judging. Ahead, a woman bends over a clay basin, scrubbing a piece of linen with rhythm and care. Her hands are coated in soap-like natron, foamy and gritty, while her elbows flex in smooth arcs. Historians still argue whether every household routinely used natron for cleaning, or if it was mostly reserved for temples and wealthier homes. But here, you see it in action. You're both impressed and intimidated by the dexterity required. You tentatively reach for a patch of cloth lying nearby, considering helping. Your attempt results in a clumsy smear of muddy water, and the woman's lips twitch in what might be amusement or mild horror.
Joke 1. You have now inadvertently dirtied something that was already clean.
Moving farther along the alley, you notice a group of children playing near a shallow, flowing canal. Their laughter rings out over the soft hum of village life, and for a moment, you almost forget to be cautious. But then the unmistakable smell reminds you. The water doubles as both a source of life and a channel for all the village's secrets. People wash, drink, and irrigate from this same flow, which forces a subtle but constant negotiation with nature. The kids splash and duck under the water, delighting in its cool embrace, while you sidestep carefully, considering how your feet would complain in the modern world about this sort of multitasking. You stop to observe a man washing a clay jug. He scrubs it with a bundle of reeds, and water spills over the edge into the canal. There's a slow, rhythmic flow to his movements, almost meditative. Fringe tidbit: some archaeologists suggest that ancient Egyptians even performed small-scale experiments with water purification, using sedimentation in jars to improve clarity, though results varied widely. Watching him, you realize that survival wasn't just about strength or cleverness. It was about consistent, careful attention to small details. You hope your modern brain is picking up some of this wisdom before it stages an official revolt. As you pass under a low doorway, you notice a line of small vessels filled with sand and water, likely used for a quick cleaning of hands or feet before entering the home. The setup looks simple, yet effective. You kneel to test it, dipping a fingertip into the cool water and rubbing it in the sand. Mud and dust cling stubbornly, but the effort feels oddly satisfying. Mainstream fact: Egyptians understood the abrasive and cleansing properties of sand long before modern soaps existed. And yet, for all their ingenuity, you realize your modern expectations would have made them roll their eyes in patient disbelief. Ahead, a rooster crows somewhere, reminding you that even in the afternoon, time is still tied to natural cues. You glance at the small homes, noting that some have small clay latrines tucked to the side, while others rely on more communal arrangements. The mixture of methods leaves you feeling slightly alarmed and mildly impressed at the adaptability of the villagers. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here, just practical approaches layered with social norms, and your modern brain struggles to reconcile both. A group of women gather herbs near a sunlit patch of ground, sorting leaves into clay containers. You step closer, curious. One of the women gestures for you to help. You try to pick a leaf delicately, but end up crushing it in your fingers. She chuckles and hands you a small bundle already prepped. You accept it with as much dignity as you can muster. Joke 2. You are officially the village's apprentice in disaster management. You turn a corner and find a communal washing area, shallow pools lined with smooth stone slabs. Women kneel in rows, scrubbing garments and chatting. The water ripples with movement, sunlight catching on the gentle waves. You watch a woman rinse a linen robe, then let it flap across a wooden beam to dry. Fringe tidbit: action here carries meaning beyond survival, layering utility with tradition. Suddenly, a small dog darts out from a side alley, yipping at a goose. Chaos ensues for a brief moment. Mud splashes, feathers fly, and you jump back just enough to avoid a direct collision. Joke 3. Your reflexes are no match for village wildlife on a busy day. You straighten yourself, brushing dust from your tunic, and continue onward, noting that despite all the minor hazards, there's an order here, a rhythm, a balance between work, play, hygiene, and survival. By the time you reach the edge of the village, you pause to observe the collective effort. People washing, children playing, small shrines tucked in corners, animals navigating the same streets without guidance. The scene feels alive in a way that modern life rarely offers. And while your modern self would have struggled, stumbled, and possibly cried in quiet corners, you've managed, barely, to participate, observe, and survive. As the sun tilts toward the horizon, casting long, cool shadows, you realize that sanitation in ancient Egypt wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about coexistence. Working with and around the land, water, and each other required attentiveness, respect, and a willingness to adapt. And while you might never fully master these skills, the experience leaves you with a deeper appreciation for the resilience and ingenuity embedded in daily life here. Even with all the missteps, spills, and near disasters, you're still standing, still breathing, and somehow still managing a modest sense of pride. For now, sanitation may be terrifying, sticky, and confusing, but it's also a lesson in perseverance. You straighten your shoulders, wipe your hands again, and prepare for the next challenge, navigating the tools, trades, and crafts that make this village a self-sufficient marvel. By now, your legs ache, your back is sore, and your modern brain is quietly filing complaints about the lack of ergonomic furniture in this ancient village. But there's no time to linger. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic clang of hammers and the scent of hot metal draws you toward a new kind of challenge: tools and craftsmanship. This is the domain where ingenuity, patience, and skill meet, and where, as a hapless time traveler, you immediately realize you are wildly out of your depth. You approach a small workshop tucked between two homes. Smoke curls lazily from a low chimney, carrying a warm metallic tang that both intrigues and warns you. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptian craftsmen worked with bronze, copper, and wood primarily, producing everything from household items to ceremonial artifacts. You peek inside and see a man hammering at a bronze blade, sparks flicking off in precise arcs. Each strike seems effortless, smooth, practiced, perfect. Your first instinct is to admire. Your second instinct is to pray that you do not get handed a hammer. The craftsman glances at you, smiles politely, and hands you a chisel. You take it carefully, feeling the weight far more substantial than anticipated. Joke 1. Yes, you've now entered the category of accidental hazard in a historically accurate workshop. He nods toward a wooden block, demonstrating how to chip away at a soft piece of wood. You mimic him. The chisel slips, twice. Sparks of panic flare as you almost stab the floor. The craftsman sighs, amused, but patient. You wonder if the modern concept of occupational safety would apply here. Probably not. Nearby, a woman is weaving fine linen on a loom that seems impossibly complex. Threads crisscross in meticulous patterns, and her fingers dart in ways your fingers only dream about in hand-eye coordination exercises. Fringe tidbit: some ancient looms allowed Egyptians to weave intricate patterns that communicated social status or even small narratives. You realize the skill required is like playing a piano and sewing a quilt simultaneously, and you can barely tie your shoelaces. You step back to observe a young apprentice carving a small figurine of Bastet, the cat goddess. The wood curls off the blade in smooth spirals. You marvel, then glance at your own attempt at chiseling a small piece of wood. You have created something that could generously be described as abstract chaos. Joke 2. Apparently, your artistic talent peaks precisely in confusing geometric forms that no one recognizes. The workshop smells of wood, metal, smoke, and sweat, a potent blend that somehow invigorates and overwhelms at the same time. You note how every craftsman seems to move in rhythm with their tools, the work itself shaping their bodies and minds. Hands are rough, arms are strong, backs are steady. You try to mimic the motions of hammering, carving, and weaving, but your muscles remember only the smooth, cushioned surfaces of modern life, and you falter. A man approaches with a small piece of copper. He intends to make a pin, simple but elegant. You take it hesitantly. He gestures for you to use a small hammer, You swing. You hit your own finger. Minor pain. Big embarrassment. The man chuckles. Historians still argue whether daily work in crafts like metalworking was inherently dangerous, or if accidents were just considered part of life. You feel strongly that your fingers might answer that question with personal anecdotes. Moving toward the loom again, the woman gives you a shuttle. You take it and try to weave a few threads. Disaster. The threads tangle, the shuttle slips. You're about one moment away from causing a small domino effect that might unravel an entire section of cloth. She guides your hands gently, showing the rhythm. You try again. Slightly better, but the threads still look like spaghetti after a toddler's birthday party. Joke 3. You're beginning to wonder if artisans ever laughed at their own mistakes, or if you've just become a permanent example for their humor. You notice a small pile of tools nearby. Wooden mallets, bronze chisels, awls, and needles. Each has a clear purpose, each designed with generations of experimentation in mind. You pick up a mallet and attempt to pound a wooden peg. You underestimate the force needed and send it flying across the room. The craftsman sighs. You nod awkwardly, catching it before it hits the floor. There's no shame here, only patient correction and the occasional side-eye that silently communicates, "Are you sure you belong in this timeline?" Despite your struggles, you begin to observe patterns. Every craftsman has a clear routine. Metalworkers tap their hammers in specific rhythms to avoid splishing the metal. Weavers keep tension consistent to maintain the cloth's integrity. Woodworkers carve at precise angles, understanding the grain intuitively. Fringe tidbit: some archaeologists believe that apprenticeships in ancient Egypt were extremely structured, combining rigorous training with hands-on trial and error, leading to mastery over decades. You suddenly feel grateful for modern YouTube tutorials, even if they can't physically prevent you from hammering your own thumb. The workshop hums with life. You see a small basket of partially finished jewelry, amulets, rings, beads strung carefully. Each piece is functional, aesthetic, and imbued with cultural or religious significance. Mainstream fact: jewelry in ancient Egypt wasn't purely ornamental. It often had protective, symbolic, or status-related purposes. You pick up a tiny scarab and turn it over in your hand. The detailing is intricate, beautiful. You try to replicate it on a small lump of clay you brought from home. Immediate failure. Your modern fingers are clumsy. Your attention span is weak. Your historical timing is off. After a brief break, you notice that the workshop itself is a microcosm of village life. Knowledge is passed down orally, by demonstration, by correction, and by participation. Everyone works in tandem, occasionally exchanging tips, sharing small stories, or laughing at minor mishaps. You realize that survival here isn't just about physical labor, it's about integration into a network of mutual support, a rhythm of life that balances individual skill with collective effort. As the afternoon wanes, you stand in the center of the workshop, bruised but oddly invigorated. Your muscles ache, your hands are sore, but you've begun to understand something. Craftsmanship in ancient Egypt is less about the finished product and more about process, patience, and persistence. Every imperfect strike of a chisel, every tangled thread, every misplaced hammer swing is part of a learning curve that spans lifetimes. And while your modern self might struggle, your awareness is expanding in ways a lecture or a book could never achieve. You glance around one last time, observing a craftsman hammering the final detail on a small bronze figurine, a weaver adjusting tension on her loom, an apprentice carefully sanding a wooden tool. You feel simultaneously humbled and inspired. Ancient Egypt doesn't forgive incompetence easily, but it rewards perseverance and attentiveness in ways you're only beginning to grasp. Stepping out of the workshop, you feel the sun lower, shadows stretching longer across the village streets. Your fingers are smudged with clay, wood dust, and sweat. Your arms ache in every joint, and yet there's a quiet satisfaction. You've survived a second round of challenges today, and maybe, just maybe, you're starting to understand what it means to exist in a world that demands constant effort, constant learning, and constant attention to every small detail. You step away from the workshop into the lengthening shadows of late afternoon, and for a brief moment you think you might finally catch your breath. But then, as if on cue, the faint clatter of hooves and the scent of dust rising from a dirt road announce the next challenge: transportation and travel in ancient Egypt. You realize that walking around a single village was exhausting enough, and now you're being reminded that the world beyond it is a whole other layer of survival entirely. The road is a narrow strip of packed earth, winding along low mud brick walls and past the occasional field. You notice oxen grazing lazily at the edge, tethered to posts. A wagon rattles past, carrying baskets of grain and clay pots. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptians used simple wooden carts with solid wheels, often pulled by oxen or donkeys, to move goods over land. The concept of traffic rules seems absent. Instead, there's a tacit understanding of who yields, who honks or brays, and who gets mud on their tunic. You step aside, but your sandal catches on a stray stone, and you stumble. A donkey raises a skeptical ear in your direction. Joke 1. You're officially outclassed by livestock. A man waves you over, holding a bundle of reeds and a small paddle. He gestures at the river you passed earlier. Boat travel, he seems to indicate, is faster and safer, depending on your ability to maintain balance. You peer at the narrow reed boat bobbing gently at the water's edge. Fringe tidbit: ancient Egyptians often used small, flexible reed boats for short trips, fishing, and transport along calm channels. They were light, buoyant, and surprisingly maneuverable, but require finesse, or you risk capsizing spectacularly. Your modern self, known for grace approximately 0% of the time, already sweats at the thought. You step in hesitantly, trying to imitate the casual poise of a fisherman who rows with an almost musical ease. The boat shifts under your weight. You flail. The paddle slips. Water splashes up like it's mocking you. The fisherman doesn't react, only smiles patiently, guiding your hands. You realize quickly that every motion, the angle of the paddle, the rhythm of your stroke, even the placement of your feet, is connected to the subtle balance of the craft. Misstep, and you are not just inefficient, you are wet, muddy, and possibly embarrassed beyond repair. As the boat glides, you take in the scenery. The riverbanks lined with reeds, herons stalking fish in shallow water, and small clusters of houses that look like they were plucked from clay and sun-baked into reality. Mainstream fact: the Nile was the primary transportation artery in ancient Egypt, with villages, towns, and cities all connected by its gentle current. Boats carried goods, people, and even ceremonial objects. You can almost hear the gentle lapping of water against the hull, hypnotic and calming, contrasting sharply with your inner panic about staying upright. A pair of fishermen nearby pull in a net, working in perfect synchrony. Their movements are fluid, almost poetic, a dance perfected over years. You try to mimic their rowing rhythm, imagining it will help your sense of balance. Instead, you end up spinning the paddle into a bird who shrieks in indignation. Joke 2. Apparently, wildlife also grades your coordination. You apologize, and the fishermen nod indulgently, clearly familiar with tourists or extremely clumsy apprentices. As the boat drifts along, you notice small floats tied to the river's edge, some carrying reeds, others small baskets of grain. Fringe tidbit: some Egyptians used these floating markers to delineate fishing areas, measure water depth, or protect crops near canals. You lean slightly to examine one, forgetting your balance, and the boat tips just enough to splash your ankle. Your dignity slides into the water along with it. The fisherman gestures for you to look beyond the reeds. In the distance, a cluster of sailboats drift slowly, their white linen sails catching the wind. You marvel at the simplicity and elegance of their design. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptians used sails on larger boats to travel greater distances, particularly for trade along the Nile.
Without engines, navigation required a deep understanding of wind, current, and river geography. Watching them, you feel a mix of awe and mild terror. Modern river skills, or lack thereof, leave you hopelessly unprepared for this ancient highway.
The boat glides past a group of children playing along the shore. They splash water at each other, laughing, their tiny feet skimming wet mud. You try to wave politely, but accidentally hit the water with your paddle, creating a mini wave that drenches a reed basket. Joke 3. Congratulations, you are officially part of the river drama now. The children cheer, thinking it's part of the game, while you silently pray your coordination improves before someone hands you a larger essel. The fisherman begins to explain, gesturing at the currents, the reeds, and the bends in the river. You nod, pretending to understand, while secretly calculating how likely you are to capsize if the boat tilts an additional inch. Historians still argue whether small river accidents were frequent or if communities had learned to navigate risk efficiently. From your perspective, frequent seems highly likely. As you reach the next landing, you step out carefully, balancing on the slim edge of the reed boat. Your modern feet protest. Mud squishes between your toes. You are aware of every possible hazard: slippery riverbank, stray stones, overexcited ducks. And yet, you've made it. Somehow, your coordination, or stubbornness, has survived intact. You pause on the shore, taking a deep breath. The river has revealed a different side of ancient Egyptian life. Not just farming, crafting, or markets, but movement, connection, and strategy. Every crossing, every paddle stroke, every careful step along the bank is another thread in the vast tapestry of survival here. You feel both humbled and strangely exhilarated. Even if your modern self might collapse in exhaustion at the thought of rowing daily, you've now glimpsed the grace and expertise embedded in everyday river travel. The sun dips lower, painting the water with streaks of gold and amber. You watch a heron take flight, wings spreading wide, gliding effortlessly across the shimmering surface. The fisherman nods toward the village in the distance, signaling the end of the journey. You step onto solid ground with a mixture of relief and pride. Today, you've survived the river. You've learned its rhythms, its dangers, and most importantly, your own limits. And yet, as you follow the path back toward familiar mudbrick homes, you realize that this was only one small part of life in ancient Egypt. If you thought the marketplace, the fields, the workshop, and sanitation were challenging, the river has reminded you that survival here requires constant awareness, adaptation, and a willingness to embrace discomfort. For now, you walk, letting the gentle sway of the river retreat from your memory, but already anticipating the next layer of life in a world that never stops testing you. By the time you reach the outskirts of the village, the sun is lowering into a soft golden haze, painting everything in warm amber and long shadows. You think you might finally have a moment to rest, but of course, ancient Egypt has one more subtle, insidious test waiting: food preparation and daily cooking. You had assumed eating would be simple: pick, cook, chew, swallow. But no, nothing here is simple. Every meal is a layered, labor-intensive process that combines skill, timing, and social nuance. And you, dear traveler, are about to learn that the kitchen is just as hazardous as the workshop or the marketplace. You step into a small courtyard where a fire smolders in a shallow clay pit. Smoke curls lazily, carrying the mixed aromas of grains, herbs, and roasting fish. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptians cooked over open fires, clay stoves, and simple hearths, using techniques such as boiling, roasting, and baking in clay ovens. Ingredients were seasonal, locally sourced, and often prepared collectively, particularly in households that produced more than one daily meal. You watch a woman knead dough with the smooth, practiced rhythm of someone who has done this countless times. Your hands itch to help, but instinctively you know the weight of inexperience will make chaos in seconds. She gestures to a small basket of grains: emmer wheat, the staple of bread making, waits to be ground into flour. Fringe tidbit: Egyptians sometimes used quernstones for this task, with one stone rotating over another to crush the grain. It is meditative, repetitive, and exhausting. You lift the top stone and immediately feel your arms tremble. Joke 1. Congratulations! You've invented a new form of medieval upper body workout, completely unintentionally.
You attempt to grind the grains, but your rhythm is all wrong. The stone slips. A few kernels spill onto the dirt. The woman's lips twitch, somewhere between amusement and horror. You apologize, wiping sweat from your brow, realizing that even this small task requires coordination, strength, and patience that your modern self has not trained for. Historians still argue whether household grinding was primarily performed by women, children, or occasionally hired laborers, but right now, you're grateful it isn't your full-time job. Once the grains are ground, the dough is mixed with water and a pinch of salt. You try to mimic her kneading, pressing the sticky mixture between your fingers, but it clings desperately, laughing at your lack of expertise. Joke 2, it's now officially personal. The dough knows you are inexperienced and is taking full advantage. You manage to form a vaguely loaf-shaped lump and place it near the clay oven. The woman nods politely, though you detect a hint of skepticism in her expression.
Meanwhile, the fire crackles, heating the oven's interior to the perfect temperature for baking. You peer inside, and the warmth is almost overwhelming, a gentle reminder that cooking here is as much about environmental awareness as technique. Fringe tidbit: clay ovens retained heat exceptionally well, allowing bakers to cook multiple loaves sequentially, sometimes stacking them like human Jenga pieces. You keep your fingers far from the opening, silently thanking your survival instincts.
Next comes fish preparation. The fish are small, shiny, and slippery, freshly caught from the Nile. You try to scale one with a blunt knife, and it immediately launches an unexpected flip. Joke 3. The fish clearly has more experience surviving than you do. The woman laughs softly, showing you the proper technique, and you mimic her movements carefully, though the result is still questionable. Mainstream historical fact: fish was a common protein in the Egyptian diet, often salted or dried for preservation, or roasted over open flames. Fresh fish required skill to clean efficiently, lest bones or scales ruin the final dish. As the sun dips lower, you're surrounded by the full sensory spectrum of ancient cooking. The smell of roasting grains, the faint smoke of the hearth, the stickiness of dough, and the slick resistance of fish. You realize that every step in food preparation is physically demanding, rhythmically precise, a minor disruption. At worst, a source of gentle chaos. You watch as the woman places the fish in a small clay dish, rubs it with salt and herbs, and positions it carefully over the fire. Fringe tidbit: Egyptians often incorporated aromatic herbs like coriander and cumin, and sometimes honey, to enhance flavor or preserve freshness. You try to sprinkle herbs evenly over your own fish, and somehow end up with a patchy, wildly uneven distribution. The woman glances at it, shrugs, and adjusts it herself. You feel a mixture of humility and amusement. Bread baking progresses slowly. You lift a small clay lid to peek at your dough, and are relieved to see it rising, albeit in a somewhat lopsided form. Mainstream fact: bread in ancient Egypt was sometimes leavened with beer brewing residues, giving it a slightly sour flavor. You have no such advantage. Your loaf is dense, uneven, and has the structural integrity of a soft brick. Still, it will feed someone, even if just barely. Nearby, another household member prepares lentils and beans, boiling them in clay pots over smaller fires. You lean in to observe, learning that timing and temperature are crucial. Too long and the legumes become mushy, too short and they remain uncooked. It's a delicate balance. You wonder how your modern patients would hold up under these conditions, already feeling your energy depleting from the day's earlier trials. As the last rays of sunlight filter through the courtyard, the meal comes together. The bread, slightly misshapen but edible. The fish, seasoned expertly by someone with infinitely more skill. The legumes, soft and fragrant. You sit cross-legged on the ground, marveling at how a simple meal represents so much knowledge, practice, and coordination.
Every bite is a reminder that survival in ancient Egypt is not about quick fixes. It's about mastering the details, paying attention to process, and respecting the rhythm of daily life.
You realize that food preparation, like every other aspect of Egyptian life you've experienced today, is both practical and symbolic. The act of cooking feeds the body, yes, but it also sustains tradition, maintains social cohesion, and honors the gifts of the Nile and the land. Historians still argue whether certain ceremonial foods were consumed daily or reserved for special occasions, but you can't help but appreciate the care and attention invested in every ordinary meal.
As you taste a small piece of bread, warm from the oven, you feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. You may be clumsy, awkward, and prone to mistakes, but you have participated. You have learned a little about grains, fish, fire, and patience. And perhaps, most importantly, you have survived yet another essential layer of life in ancient Egypt, a world that rewards diligence, presence, and humility above all else. With the meal prepared and the courtyard quieting as the evening shadows stretch across the village, you think you might finally catch a moment to rest. But of course, ancient Egypt has one last subtle trial waiting: nighttime and the world of domestic safety, sleep, and security. As the sun slips below the horizon, the temperature drops, shadows deepen, and the village transforms in ways that are both enchanting and mildly intimidating. You quickly realize that surviving here requires more than strength or skill. It requires constant vigilance, awareness of surroundings, and an understanding of the subtle rhythms of life after dark.
The first thing you notice is the firelight flickering in doorways and hearths. Mainstream historical fact: households in ancient Egypt often relied on small fires or oil lamps to provide light during the evening. These fires were used for warmth, cooking, and modest illumination, but they were also a hazard. One misstep could easily ignite a home made almost entirely of sun-dried mud and reeds. You step carefully around the courtyard, noticing that even shadows seem to demand respect. Every movement is deliberate, each footfall measured. You are hyper-aware of every surface, every stick, and every stray ember.
A dog pads past you, low to the ground, its ears flicking toward the distant sounds of the river. Fringe tidbit: domesticated animals like dogs and cats played crucial roles in nightly security, not just companionship. Dogs often patrolled properties, while cats were prized for keeping rodents in check. You reach down to pet the dog gently, who accepts your touch before padding off with an air of dignified disinterest. Joke 1. Clearly, you are not the alpha here, merely a guest in a world where even animals follow rules you have yet to comprehend. As the village grows quieter, you notice the subtle chorus of nighttime sounds: the gentle lapping of water against the Nile, the distant calls of nocturnal birds, the faint rustle of reeds swaying in a cooling breeze. These sounds are peaceful, almost hypnotic, but you can't ignore that in ancient times, nighttime also meant exposure to predators and hazards. Crocodiles lingered near slower riverbands, snakes found refuge in mud walls, and stray animals could wander unpredictably. Historians still argue whether fear of nocturnal wildlife was a dominant factor in settlement design, or more of a cultural narrative, but you are keenly aware that walking alone at night would be ill-advised. Inside the home, the family prepares for the night. Children are guided to sleep on mats arranged neatly on the floor, their heads often elevated with small cloth bundles. Adults settle on similar bedding, with small personal items nearby. The aroma of herbs lingers in the air: frankincense, myrrh, and sometimes crushed lotus petals, used both for pleasant scent and minor insect deterrence. Fringe tidbit: ancient Egyptians believed certain scents could protect against evil spirits or restless souls. You inhale, feeling a strange calm descend. You're offered a small mat near the fire to rest. You notice the practical arrangement. Bedding is close enough to warmth, yet far enough from flames to prevent accidental ignition. Mainstream historical fact: homes were designed with airflow and temperature in mind, balancing warmth at night with ventilation for smoke from lamps and cooking fires. You lie down,
trying to settle your muscles that have been on alert all day. But your mind buzzes with everything you've experienced: markets, sanitation, workshops, river travel, and cooking. Sleep seems like a distant concept, a prize earned only after enduring the cumulative challenges of daily life. The night carries subtle lessons. You realize that the Egyptians' awareness of safety, combined with daily routines, created an almost invisible network of protection. Neighbors watched out for one another, animals provided early warnings, and every household had adapted to its environment through trial, error, and tradition. You, with your modern mindset, would need constant reminders to respect these routines. Otherwise, you'd end up with a scraped knee, a bruised ego, or worse. Outside, a group of elders discusses the day's events, their voices low but deliberate. They mention flood levels, crop conditions, and local temple offerings. You strain to catch a word, but mostly you observe the cadence of their conversation. Historians still argue whether village councils functioned formally or informally, but from your perspective, it seems like a combination of both. Decisions are made collectively, yet leadership is often silent, expressed through gestures, tone, and shared understanding. As darkness deepens, you hear the rhythmic croaking of frogs from the nearby irrigation channels. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, yet a subtle reminder of the water's omnipresence and its potential dangers at night. Fringe tidbit: the presence of frogs and other amphibians was often associated with fertility and renewal in Egyptian culture, symbolizing the life-giving power of the Nile. You reflect on how this symbolism contrasts sharply with the very real hazards of living alongside the river. Finally, the household settles fully. Mats are aligned, fires are reduced to embers, and lamps flicker quietly. You lie down, feeling the day's exertions and minor disasters settling into memory. Your body aches in a way that feels earned. Your mind hums with the endless small lessons of survival. And yet, in the quiet, you recognize a deep sense of satisfaction. You have navigated a day and evening in ancient Egypt, stumbling, laughing, nearly drowning, almost burning, and generally surviving against odds you had never anticipated. As you close your eyes, the warmth from the embers and the subtle hum of the village lull you toward rest. You think of the river, the marketplace, the workshop, and the kitchen, each a layer of challenge and learning. Ancient Egypt is beautiful, intricate, and demanding. And tonight, in this small home, among animals, family, and firelight, you finally glimpse what it must have meant to live fully attuned to its rhythms. Night deepens over the village, and the quiet hum of life settles into a soft, constant rhythm. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint scent of drying reeds, baked bread, and the lingering aroma of the day's cooking. You lie on your mat, the heat from the day slowly ebbing from your body, muscles aching in a way that feels almost familiar, almost deserved. There's a gentle, almost musical chorus outside. Frogs croak along the river, an owl's distant call punctuates the stillness, and a breeze rustles the leaves of a small fig tree near the courtyard. You realize that despite all the chaos and challenges of the day, there is a rhythm here, a natural order that carries the village seamlessly from one day to the next. And you, for a brief, clumsy, and slightly soaking time, have been a part of it. You think back to the morning, the marketplace with its sensory overload, the stubborn fish, the relentless goats, and the bartering that left your modern brain spinning. You remember the smells, the shouts, the laughter, the tiny victories of successfully buying bread without causing a scandal. Then came sanitation, which turned out to be an exercise in mindfulness, patience, and a subtle respect for the unexpected dangers lurking in mud and water. The fields, the workshop, and the river travel taught you about rhythm, observation, and how a single misstep could be humiliating or even dangerous. And of course, cooking demanded precision, care, and more attention than you thought your tired body could muster. Each layer of daily life revealed a delicate balance between necessity and ingenuity, effort and ritual, danger and beauty. You lie back and feel the subtle ache of muscles you didn't know existed, a reminder that survival in ancient Egypt demanded physicality in almost every task. You think of your clumsy attempts with the chisel, the paddle, the dough, and the fish, and a smile tugs at the corners of your lips. Fringe tidbit. Some archaeologists believe that these daily physical exertions contributed to longevity and robust health, albeit accompanied by frequent minor injuries and chronic aches. You now understand why. Every task required constant awareness, repeated motion, and careful calibration of your body against the environment. The firelight flickers low, casting shadows that dance across the walls. You realize that sleep here is both a reward and a necessity, a chance to recover, reset, and prepare for another day where the world tests you in ways you could never fully anticipate. Historians still argue whether villagers maintained strict routines for sleep, or if Nightfall simply dictated rest. But from your perspective, it's clear that both strategy and instinct played roles. Each household rhythm, bedding mats aligned, fires reduced, animals secured, reflects a careful balance between comfort, practicality, and vigilance. Your thoughts drift to the broader picture, the Nile flowing endlessly, the fertile land sustained by annual floods, the village itself a network of interdependence where every person, animal, and task contributes to survival. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Egyptian society depended heavily on cooperation, knowledge of natural cycles, and skilled labor in agriculture, crafts, and trade. You feel a quiet awe at how much of this society's stability relied on ordinary people performing repetitive, demanding tasks with precision and care. You consider the moments of levity, children playing along the riverbank, dogs padding softly through the village, merchants laughing over failed negotiations. Joke 1. It seems even thousands of years ago, humans found ways to make chaos entertaining. These small, enduring glimpses of humor, mischief, and camaraderie create a thread of continuity that transcends time, a reminder that even in worlds so different from our own, joy, laughter, and human warmth remain essential. Your mind shifts to the lessons you've absorbed involuntarily: awareness of surroundings, respect for the environment, patience with processes that cannot be rushed, and humility in the face of tasks that feel simple yet are deceptively complex. Fringe tidbit: some scholars suggest that the daily routines of Egyptians, grounding grains, preparing meals, weaving cloth, also served as a form of meditative practice, aligning mind and body through repetitive, skillful motion. You feel the truth of this in your own tired limbs and quiet breathing. The courtyard grows even quieter. You hear only the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant water lapping along the riverbank. Your body begins to sink into the mat, each muscle releasing its tension, slowly, deliberately, as though accepting that tonight, rest is earned. Joke 2. You might just survive the night without toppling into the fire, losing a fish, or accidentally chopping off a finger, though the jury is still out. As sleep tugs at your consciousness, your thoughts soften. You imagine tomorrow, another day in a village built on careful observation, learned skill, and a rhythm that guides all activity. You picture the sun rising over mud-brick rooftops, children scampering, merchants arranging their goods, and the river flowing, ever present, carrying life along its banks. And you feel a sense of profound respect for those who navigated this world day after day, living fully attuned to its demands, dangers, and delights. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids grow heavy, the day fades into memory, the village into gentle shadows, and the river into a lullaby.
Even if you wouldn't last a full day in this world unaided, tonight you have glimpsed its beauty, its complexity, and its enduring rhythm. You close your eyes, body relaxed, mind at ease, and let the world of ancient Egypt lull you towards sleep.
And as the night deepens, remember, survival is not only about strength, skill, or cunning. Sometimes it is about observing, participating, and simply being present, letting the world teach you one small, humbling, and infinitely human lesson at a time. End of script. Sweet dreams.